Greetings, I'm Dave Gilmore, and this is Design Intelligence. Don Harrier has over 4 decades of industry experience in architecture with an emphasis on studio management, creating cohesive team dynamics, and promoting individuals' professional growth. With a lifetime affinity for rowing and water, he shares the parallels between rowing and leadership dynamics, and the idea that no matter how hard you row, if you don't harmonize with your crew, you will never achieve a winning edge.
Welcome to this edition of This is Design Intelligence, conversations with leadership voices in the built environment.
Don, thanks for joining me in the studio here at Design Intelligence today.
My pleasure, Dave. Great to be here.
So it was kind of fun getting to see you come to Atlanta. We've had some time to work together on some other things. And our producer said, why don't we get the two of you together to talk about a very important topic on This is Design Intelligence. And so that's what we're going to do today. So Don, you have had a lifetime affinity with rowing and water and being out and about. Tell us, when did you first get into the sport of rowing?
Well, it was the summer before my freshman year at UCLA. I was out there for orientation, and we had an event at the UCLA swimming pool. It was hosted barbecue, and we walked through the gates of the swimming pool area and the aquatic center, and there was a gentleman standing off to the side, and we were all freshmen, and he was the freshman crew coach. And he was looking for individuals over 6 feet tall. This was his recruiting platform. And he pulled me and my roommate out and began to introduce the idea of rowing. And, outside of the Olympics, I really had no concept of rowing. And he said, well, we're going to be here in the fall. I'd love you to come by and talk to us about rowing. And I did, and ended up having just one of the most remarkable periods of my life with 8 other guys.
Extraordinary. And then I think it was in 2013, the book was published, Boys in the Boat. And it was an amazing story of the Depression years, coming out of that period, still in it. There was uncertainty going on in Europe about a rising new power in Germany that became the Nazi Germany. And then in this, there was the 1936 Olympics. I believe that's correct. And then there was a crew team put together to compete there, of kind of a ragtag of guys that were brought together to pull this off. It's an extraordinary story. You and I were reflecting about this, and about the movie doesn't quite capture all the spirit of the book, and that's usually the case, isn't it? Other than maybe the Lord of the Rings series, they took the time to do it right and had unlimited money to kind of do it right. But I'd like to hear from you, what are your reflections on this book, The Boys in the Boat, because you have used that book since it came out as a gift to many of your colleagues and employees and other folks that you've influenced. Why? What is it about that story that inspires you to inspire others?
I think at the essence, it's Daniel James Brown, the author, who brings to light the leadership qualities of rowing that you don't see immediately within your rowing career. This is something that I have found that through life, with interactions with different individuals at different levels of personal relationships in my professional life, that I hearken back to the days of rowing. And Daniel James Brown brings to life the essence of collaboration within an 8-man shell. The ideal of how a man could row as hard as he wanted to, but as he states in the book, without harmonizing with your crewmates, you will never really achieve a winning edge. And winning can be in the competitive sense, or it can be in the sense of just the perfect row. And harmonizing with your crewmates can only take place through caring about your crewmates. And that's really the essence of what took a group of 9 men in 1932 as freshmen at the University of Washington through competition through all 4 years and into the Olympics to win a gold medal. The book really talks through how important it is to harmonize, to care, to, in life, I think one of the most important things is, what do we do for one another to achieve success? And in this case, within the book, those crewmates were making sure you were up for breakfast, you were at practice, you cared enough to go out of your way to make sure after a party they got home on time, and so forth. So it's in this essence that the book talks about what it means to lead yourself, lead others, care for others, and certainly be on that vulnerable trip through agony and pain that come with the sport.
So in the process of crew and of rowing, you have everybody, I'm guessing, needing to maintain the same cadence, yes?
You bet.
And then I'm guessing, in addition to that, I've always been curious about the depth of the oars. And this has made me wonder, because you and I were talking about this. I think about people that do a bicycle built for two, and the person on the front is just pulling and pulling and can't see behind them whether the person is really pedaling or they're just enjoying the ride, kind of thing. And I'm wondering if in crew, is there a discipline about the depth and the pull of the oar? Or do we find sometimes some people are what I call dipping deep and pulling hard, and other people are just splashing the top of the water? How do you respond to that, Todd?
Well, it's very true. The technical components of rowing are you row literally millions of strokes throughout your career, and to find that right stroke at the right time is what all 8 in the boat really try to achieve. And as I say, that when you harmonize, it's just not, simply just, hey, buddy, what's going on? You have to pay attention to what's in front of you, because as you know, the crew is looking behind the direction they're coming from. So you're looking at the guy's back and you're studying him and you're watching and keeping pace. And so as the blade enters the water, you are in the same outstretched moment of your crewmate. And then the catch, as we call it, in the water has to be, as you say, at the right depth. That just comes from simply thousands and thousands of practice strokes during the week. And, that you bring up cadence. It's like music. Cadence is a note in this way, where we're following along. The perfect stroke becomes, the key that you're in music. So the symphony comes together in a beautiful way when everybody is following that same sheet of music. Rowing is the very same way. To move the boat effectively, everybody has to be reading the music the same.
It's a great illustration. I love that. So you and I have been doing leadership development work for a few years now across the country in many different firms, and we've gotten to interface with just dozens and dozens of people that are seeking leadership growth in their lives, and it's been really fulfilling for us. This idea of cadence, I have the privilege of getting to, through our advisory work at DI Advisors, we get to look into the lives of leadership and how they operate across a firm. And so often we see this out of cadence dynamic occurring where a CEO has a vision and is stepping at a certain place, and then we see different folks that are in that team operating at a different cadence. So you start to get this stuttering of activity, and the boat, meaning the firm, is not progressively unified in the way it's advancing, whether it's advancing internally as a culture or externally in the markets and marketplaces. Talk to us about how that dynamic of leadership cadence falls apart within your observations of looking at firms, and what causes that coordination to get lost in leadership.
Great question, and applying it again to the experiences of rowing, like a strategy for a firm. A race in rowing is typically 2,000 meters, and it's done over a series of 500-meter cadence the stroke count elevates when you're off the mark at the beginning of the race. It levels out during the middle period. And then again, the last 500, you begin to sprint to the finish. You really stomp on it. That's a strategy. And so cadence is very, very important. Everybody has to understand and listen, be mindful of the coxswain who is calling out the increase in stroke or the decrease in stroke and so forth. Much like the work that we do, Dave, with other firms and the strategies that we help firms come to realize is that it is a long haul. There is a course to be had, and certainly the cadence of when to press, when to pull back, the whole idea of taking stock of everybody that you have within the boat or within the firm. That's the privilege of being a leader, privilege of being in a boat like a coxswain to be able to manage that process. And so I think with what we're seeing in the industry is the built environment world. The CEOs, the leaders, and then those that they encourage to become leaders, to look at leadership, really need to look and answer the question as the most important piece of it is, what is the race course? Where are we going? We often talk about the North Star. You have to have those things set in place, and you have to set realistic goals, timelines, and so forth. And I think if people just stood back and thought about that for a second, it would crystallize, particularly when you think about the experiences of Boys in the Boat and how they achieved that gold medal.
Hearing you, the coxswain is critical to all of this, right? Because they're maintaining everything that's happening. And certainly in leadership, the role of communication is essential to maintaining the pace. This is where my observation has been. This is so often you have this wonderfully visionary, the strategic leader who will broadcast the direction. This is where we're going. This is what needs to be done. And then you wonder, did that spaghetti not stick on the wall? What's going on? People aren't getting it, right? It doesn't seem like it's working. And I find far too often that leadership will put out a word and say, I'm done. I've done my part. They got it. They should run with it. But we know as humans, we're so distracted and inundated by so many other voices speaking into our lives that it's responsible to repeat a thing multiple times, not in an obnoxious way, but in a reinforcing way. That it's really important to maintain the message of the cadence that needs to be achieved. Secondly, it seems that essential to this is also validating that the message was heard, not assuming or presuming reception, but validating reception on the part of the audiences that you're speaking this vision and this strategy into, lest you just get exasperated and frustrated why I keep saying something and some things aren't happening. We all have filters, and we filter out what I think is important. You may not think is important, so you filter that out, right? What are your observations around this idea of leadership communication, Don?
Well, it essentially, again, and we're on the topic of Boys in the Boat. The example here is that you have 8 individuals that come from all over the world in a boat. They're different sizes, different temperaments, different abilities with respect to experiences athletically, and they come together to perform in a way that is magical. A leader within any firm needs to understand those attributes of their team and be able to direct a message appropriately and singularly to each individual. You can't have, in my opinion, the same messaging to the masses. And some people may say, well, hey, look, I don't have time to do that. Okay. The importance is that you do try to make the time. That is what leadership is. That's the harmonization that the author in the book speaks about, is that unless you know somebody, unless you truly care deeply, then that message will resonate because you're delivering it in a manner that goes to the essence of the individual. And we need to stride toward that goal as leaders to have that care enough to truly have conversations and messaging to our people so that we do stay in cadence, that we do have that blade enter the water at the right time together.
I'm curious, Don. I mean, you've been in a lot of boats and you've taken a lot of strokes, right? You've done this over the years. Have you ever witnessed a teammate that's sitting in front of you, either directly or two or three in front of you, that you can see is not pulling their part, or is somehow something's inhibiting or distracting them from the coxswain's pace? And how is that the coxswain's job only to watch the 8 guys in the boat, or is there an accountability member to member to watch one another and help each other? I'm curious how that works in a crew.
Everybody has a bit of a set responsibility within the boat. At the stern, you have the strokes, which really are leading the cadence from the coxswain to everybody else in the boat. In the center of the boat is what we call the engine room. Those are the big dudes, really pulling and moving the boat. And in the bow, you have really the individuals that are the finesse rowers. They're the ones that are attempting to balance the boat as all that energy comes through it and begins to move off the water. And so I think the essence of the question that we're posing right now is, how do we get the messaging across to everybody from leaders and what the strategy is? It is a role that we play within organizations. We number one, have to understand that role, to understand then how critical our actions, behaviors help the firm move towards that strategy. The culture of the boat is always one where, yes, you should be able to call somebody out, somebody that's moving up the slide too quickly and causes the boat to waver and oars dump into the water early. And so how do you do that? Is it through yelling and screaming, or is it through simply, hey buddy, hey, take it easy, let's go, let's calm ourselves? And that is traditionally the role of the coxswain, but it's also what we do with one another as we notice these things. And so collaboratively within organizations, I believe that the culture needs to understand, the body of the culture needs to understand each role they play and how we together collaborate with one another to ensure that each one of us is covered. It's not just simply, okay, my responsibility, I got this. It's our responsibility. And that is truly what moves a boat, when you have that understanding that we're all in that symphony of motion. Same thing that exists within the organizations. It is a symphony. We have to understand that we're timing ourselves correctly, and we're being open to when we come in to play a note and so forth.
So, wow, what a metaphor, this idea of a symphony. And that really challenges us in the role of a senior-most leader taking on the role of a conductor versus taking on the role of an administrator. And far too often we get caught in the mire of administration, and we wonder why we're playing whack-a-mole all day, because we've lost control of our symphony, right? We're not maintaining a unity that's there. Wow, what a great way to think about this. One last question, observation, and it really has to do with trust. There's 9 folks in the boat, is that right? 8 rowers and 1 coxswain, or is that right?
Correct.
So we have 8 rowers that are in this boat, and you have the guys at the stern, the center, and the bow. And each set has a unique responsibility that they need to perform. And I'm guessing it's 2, 4, 2. Is that how that works?
Yes.
The engine room is 4.
You bet.
Okay, great. So thank you for being tolerant of my ignorance of this.
No, not at all.
But thank you so much. So when I think about all of this, I think that even though there are clarity of responsibilities, and each might carry their responsibilities, there must be a binding trust that operates between these 3 responsibilities, because you have to trust each other to win the race. You have to trust each other is doing their responsibility. but also trust each other to keep one another accountable. How do we carry that forward in this conversation?
Well, in our business, in the built environment, our end product is generally a design and a built project. What goes on before that and everything that happens from conception of an idea or the signing of a contract is much in the same way as what happens when a boat crosses a finish line in first place, is that the hours going into preparation and rowing, you're on the water, 2.5 hours a day. You're also on land running, jumping, weights, erging, any number of different activities to prepare your body. In preparing your body and your soul and the ability to perform, you're with these crewmates an extraordinary amount of time. And so trust grows from the experiences together, the camaraderie together, the notion that we have a higher goal. And in the workplace, I think those same attributes continue to be required to be reinforced, is that the trust comes from working closely together, in that you don't miss meetings. You check on one another. You do the mundane. You redline. You review. You talk through. It's conversation in our business that carries the design to fruition, to constantly be double checking and understanding where pressure points might be to get things done. And that is only accomplished, again, I go back to the beginning of our podcast, Dave. You have to care about the individuals you're sitting next to.
What a fantastic way for us to end this session of This is Design Intelligence. Don Harrier, thank you so much for joining us in the studio today.
My pleasure, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of This is Design Intelligence. The producer is Laura Spells. The sound engineer is Jared Knable. This has been a DI Media Group production.